Shay Brown with IgniteU, and today we're here with an amazing panel of awesome guests to talk about economic development. I'm going to let each and every one of them go through and introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do and why they're here today. Lucas, would you like to get us started?
Sure. My name is Lucas Ashby. I'm the Deputy Director of the Rensselaer County Industrial Development Agency. I've been with them for about a year now, partnered with IgniteU in the Chamber and EDC, and we're working to make economic development happen here, not only in Rensselaer County, but the capital region.
Yeah. Oh, excited. I'm so happy to have you here today. Danielle, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Danielle Davis. I'm the Director for BIPOC Business Growth at the Capital Region Chamber. And I get asked this question all the time, so let me clarify. BIPOC means Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So that's what I do. Try to help BIPOC businesses that have reached that roadblock to see what we can do to help them grow and get over that hump.
Awesome. This is going to be a great conversation already. Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing, Shay. Thank you for having me. My name's Ryan Silva. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Economic Development Council. We are the membership association for economic development organizations and professionals across New York State. We've got just under 1,000 members, and we represent industrial development agencies, or IDAs, chambers of commerce. Both organizations that are joining the panel here today actually are members of our organization, and both organizations, their colleagues, are on our board. We focus on advocacy, education, and policy development. So how do we create policies that will drive economic growth across New York State?
Wow, this is going to be so exciting. I'm really, really thrilled to have all three of you guys here today to have a really great combo. So I want to go ahead and jump into the first question. It's a very simple one, which is, what is economic development to you? I'm going to go to each individual from the perspective of the work that you do. Lucas, do you want to start?
No, I want to start.
Fair enough. Put me right on point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lucas. I appreciate that. To me, economic development really takes on a lot of different definitions depending upon the part of the state or the part of the region you're in. But ultimately, economic development is about improving the quality of life for the communities that we live in. So that can take the shape of job creation, job retention. It can mean workforce development. It can mean creating clean energy opportunities across New York State, revitalizing neighborhoods in downtown Main Street corridors. It means housing, bringing more housing to communities where housing is needed. So there's a variety of different definitions. There is no sort of Webster's here is what it is and what it means. But ultimately, it is about improving the quality of life of the communities and the constituents we serve.
Wow, Ryan, I love that. And I really like the fact that there is no set guidebook for this, because it is constantly evolving. That's the whole idea of economics in general, right? It's that it's constantly changing with what is going on culturally, whatever is going on internationally. So that's really cool, and I'm glad to hear that. Would either of you like to go next?
Yes.
All right. So, just to follow on from what Ryan said, of course, I have to do research to make sure I have the perfect answer. It is that, but from a business perspective, a lot of people confuse economic development with community development. And from the business perspective, it's looking more for me at the business growth, business expansion, and business startup, just starting businesses. Because when the economic side thrive, when the businesses thrive, then the communities that he spoke about, they will thrive as well, because you will have that generational wealth that is created. And your question specifically is, what does it mean to me? Based on the project I'm working on, it means that when BIPOC businesses thrive, then the BIPOC communities will thrive. And it is absolutely important that BIPOC businesses that are part of the landscape, grow. Because right now they're struggling. So it's important that they grow. And that's what it means to me, to actually see expansion, see new businesses starting, and that will pass on to the communities and create generational wealth.
That is so critically important. And it actually was a great follow-up to what Ryan had said about the impacts of community. It is important to understand the business side and the impacts that it has, but what that means to communities is also really important. Thank you. That was a great answer, Lucas.
Yeah, so I can go now. Setting the stage.
You got it.
Great answers, and I'll piggyback on both of them. At the IDA, we wanted to incentivize those companies to come to Rensselaer County or even the capital region. And one example is Regeneron Pharmaceuticals company over in East Greenbush. They've been here for several years, and they have pay in lieu of tax as a pilot with the IDA. So there are mixed feelings about pilots, but there's no question that because Regeneron has come to East Greenbush, millions of dollars in tax revenue has been sent to the East Greenbush School District. Millions of dollars in payroll. So people living in our community are now spending that money in the capital region, and it benefits municipalities, infrastructure, all those things, but also small businesses. I've talked to a few different small business owners that bring their services to Regeneron and have contracts with them that they otherwise would never have, just because of this one big company that's invested in this community. And that's happening with Regeneron. We have Amazon out in the town of Skodak. Same thing. So those big companies, there is that trickle down effect. I know that's one of the other questions, but
Yeah.
they make a difference for sure. They transform a community in a good way.
Yeah, no, and we will get more into that, and especially, you know, there's also Micron as an example out in Syracuse that's having the same kind of impact. So this is a great thing to kind of build into. But what I'd love to do now that we've kind of gotten an idea of what it means economic development wise from different perspectives here, to get into a little bit, Danielle, I want to have you start if you don't mind. You know, how then now we have this understanding, how do we shift our, you know, small ideas, our small projects, our hobbies into an actual small business? What is the jump start for that to kind of get into then what these two do?
Okay. And again, here we have to understand the difference between a side hustle and a small business. You know, you will hear people say, oh, I have a small business. But if you still have your full-time job and you're not really working on that business, really what you have is a side hustle that brings you extra income. For people wanting to start a small business, there's some key things that they need to understand. We keep hearing, oh, you must have a business plan. But a lot of people don't know why you need a business plan and what is actually in that business plan. But even before you start that business plan, just do some research, which will end up going into your business plan as well. Is there a problem that you're trying to solve? Is there an opportunity that you're trying to make use of? Is your business idea or your product, is it profitable? Do that research to see if there is a market for it. Have some understanding of what it takes to actually start a small business, run a business. Is it that I'm an expert plumber and I want to start my own plumbing business, but do I have the business acumen? What's my personality trait that makes me able to run this business? Or should I have someone do that for me? I'm an integral part of that business and I can utilize my skill. Because you can have a skill. People can love your food. People can love your pastry that you make. People can love your champagne that you make. But do you have the skill to run that business? And there are tons of resources out there that people can use to, you know, fill out forms, ask those questions, you know, in terms of your personality. Do you have the finances? Do you have this? Do you have that to start? And then you can determine, well, it is profitable. There is a market for it, or maybe there isn't. And at the chamber, we have a boot camp that some people go through that boot camp, and at the end, they're like, nah, I don't think I'm going to do this. Because they realize there's so much more that's required than just having an idea. There's so much that's required. During the pandemic, a lot of businesses tried to get the PPP loan and they struggled. Why? Because they had their receipts in a little box. They don't realize you need accounting software, or you need an accountant or a bookkeeper. They don't realize that they need legal services. So those are some of the things that, you know, people need to understand to start a business. And is it a side hustle or a business? And if it's a business, treat it as a business, and not just work in the business, but work on the business as well. Each day, having a decision, where do I want this to go? Do I want it to stay here? Do I want expansion? And how do I see expansion? Is it having different locations, or is it an increase in revenue? So there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and you touched on some really great things, and one of those things is the last part you said, which is how do you envision, you know, your business existing and continuing to exist? And we're going to have a conversation later on about reframing success and what that means to small businesses. So we're going to touch back more on that. But I also want to hit on research. You mentioned that. You were like, your business, if you want to do it, research, is there a market for it? And I kind of want to go to you two then, because both of your organizations offer like grants and other kinds of resources and things like that to people who are small businesses looking to help, you know, other organizations that might need certain kinds of skills or whatever, as Danielle was mentioning. So would either of you kind of like to touch on that?
So I think we were having this conversation before we came online here. There are resources out there, free resources out there that want to help you, and it's incumbent on you to take advantage of those resources. Otherwise, you can kind of just float around and you're missing out on those opportunities. So doing your research is very, very important, and taking advantage of the different programs out there will be to your benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, like you said, so many. The boot camp one sounds amazing. We'll have to provide a link for that for everybody, because that sounds great.
I'll just quickly clarify, we don't provide incentives directly. So,
Right.
We don't hand out ceremonial checks. Our partners and our members do. And, I really loved how Danielle talked about the side hustle thing, because that's sort of this new generation of workforce, this new generation of entrepreneurship is, my father worked in one place for 40 years. He started working when he was 21, 22, retired when he was 60, one place. The average individual will work anywhere from 6 to 7 to 9 different places throughout their career now. So how do you identify whether or not what you're doing is, in fact, a side hustle or a viable business opportunity? And the amount of resources that exist out there really are there to help guide a person in making that decision. Do I want to fully delve into this business? And the entrepreneurial training program at the Capital Region Chamber is a great example. The small business development centers, which are located all across New York State, the Small Business Administration, Empire State Development, your local industrial development agency, all of these organizations and entities provide a tool or a resource to help somebody, whether they're a beginning entrepreneur, a small to medium-sized business, or ultimately a larger company like a Regeneron. But an organization like ours, we're really there to serve as a navigator. So to help you understand this giant ecosystem of acronyms, right? There's the IDA, there's the EDC, the LDC, the SBDC,
Right.
all these different terms. And, it can be a little overwhelming at times. You're like, oh, where do I even begin? But fundamentally, you start with your local community. You find out who are the organizations that understand the region and the community that you live in best, and help them help you throughout this process and this journey. And it may turn out you go through a program and you're like, yeah, this isn't for me. To me, that's an economic development success, because you're helping somebody understand maybe getting into business isn't right for me. I am a great chef, but I don't want to run a restaurant. So maybe they start a catering business somewhere down the line, but at least they have that baseline knowledge now and understanding of what it takes to get into owning and operating a small business.
Yeah, that was really great.
And just to add to what Ryan said,
please.
absolutely correct. I remember when I started my business, what year are we in? 13 years ago. I had absolutely no idea of the resources that exist. And I found out about the boot camp 5 years into business, and I did it. And I say to people all the time, there are resources out there that are there to help you, to hold your hand, to guide you through. The SBDC was very critical during the pandemic in helping people get PPP loans, the EIDL and stuff like that. And we sometimes see those organizations as, oh, no, that's not for me and it's too much. But it's a simple thing of going online and just asking for help. Someone will reach out to you. So there's a ton of local resources that we have that people just don't know about. Right here, PTAC, IgniteU. It's all here. The center of gravity, which is on this building, that people don't know that these resources exist. I had a young entrepreneur come to me and I said, okay, I'm going to introduce you to so-and-so at the center of gravity. This is something you can use. No, I don't need that. I don't. After lots of to and fro and he showed up, he was like, wow, I didn't know. Because we struggle sometimes and sometimes we reject the help that exists and we don't understand what's out there. So that's a good point, Ryan, about the local resources that are there to guide us, to help us. And sometimes you have to pay, sometimes there's free federal funding, state funding, but there's help.
Yeah, definitely. And so just kind of be on a little side tangent there for a second. How do we get people then to want to engage in these kind of local resources and programs? Does anyone kind of have you been brain busting about that a little bit? Because I know that is something that we want to do. We want to get more people in the door of these just like little things, even if it means that they learn they don't want to have a small business. It is good economically because now they know the direction that they're looking to go. What are ways we can get people into the door?
I think social media plays a huge role. I mean, people were always engaged, whether it be on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So getting that message out there that these programs exist is one thing. Cold calls sometimes. I was just talking to Nick about that. Just calling businesses to let them know that you're there and you're willing to help. That could help as well. So yeah, getting your message out there on a megaphone is big.
Yeah, definitely.
Just to expand on what Luke said, it's something I notice entrepreneurs struggle with. It's called marketing. I'm no marketing expert, but social media is one part of marketing. That's one way to get your message out there. But what I think the agencies probably are not mastering is that art, the art of marketing, the art of saying, here we are, this is what we do. This is our mission. This is what we're trying to do. We want economic development and this is how we're going to do it. And so we say to the entrepreneurs, we say to the small businesses, you need to market, you need to brand, you need to do this. But then are we as agencies, and I say we collectively, are we doing it? Are we saying to people, hey, we are here to help you?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
So, excellent point. Use LinkedIn for the professionals. Use Facebook. There are groups on Facebook to say, hey, this agency is here. This is what we do. I just completed a 3-part workshop series, and I use social media to get the message out there. Of course, I also use our email, and we have over 2,000 members at the chamber, so that helped. But social media helps, and that's just one way to market your product, market yourself, and market what you do.
And there's also networking opportunities. There's so many different events for people to go to, whether it be with your organizations or others. But I think especially nowadays when it's easy to kind of rely on Zoom or stay home, it's important for people to get back out there, go to events, interact with people face to face, get your message out there in person. It makes a big difference. You can connect with somebody so much better, in my opinion, if you're having a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Accessibility is critical to that too, right?
Yeah.
We're a statewide association. We're based out of Albany. How can somebody on Long Island understand what our organization and what it does if I've actually never been there?
Yeah.
So, not just doing the social media aspects, but as Lucas was saying, going out into communities. If I want somebody to come to Rensselaer County, I don't sit there and wait for my phone to ring or wait for somebody to click like on my profile. I go out to California, I go to Georgia, I go to these trade shows, and I talk about the great things that we have in our communities. So being proactive and meeting people where they are in whatever part of the economic cycle they're in too. So if you want to drive entrepreneurship, going out into those communities where there is a history of success with entrepreneurship, and understanding that landscape is critical. So there's so many different strategies that you have to implement in order to be successful in driving economic growth into your local communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved what you said about accessibility too. I think that that's very important. It's a big aspect of everything that we do. We want all of our resources to be accessible to people and make sure that everyone can actually get new information and knowledge and build their businesses. So a critical element to starting a small business, as we all know, is capital. And I think that a lot of us really want to take the time to understand, what does that mean to acquire the capital? I want to start base level first, and then I want to build on this. So I'm a small business. How do I acquire capital?
Well, I guess
Anyone, yeah.
I guess I'm tackling that one.
Sure, you can start.
That is one of the biggest hurdles, especially in the BIPOC community. You have a business idea. You first have to know what it is going to take to get to start up. How much money do I need to start up based on what my plan is, based on what I need to do in phase 1, in year 1. So this is what it requires. You have to ask yourself, do I have the money? Or do I have family and friends that are gonna fund it? And if that doesn't exist, because everyone likes to use the word bootstrap and what that means. If I don't have the money, I don't have family or friends that's gonna be able to, give me that money to start my business, where do I go? First of all, if you approach the traditional lenders, the banks don't really lend to startups. You have to have been in business and show that you have revenue. But then there are also alternative sources of funding. There's a community loan fund here in the capital region. The chamber itself also has a small business microloan fund. But you have to have a business plan. Anyone that's going to lend you money need to see that plan on paper where it says, this is my business idea. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I am going to make money, because people want to know how you're going to repay that loan. Why would I lend you money? Because you tell me that you can make beautiful cups that says IgniteU New York. How are you going to sell it? How are you going to market it? Where's your market? Who's your target market? Have you done the research to see if there is a need, if there's a market for that? Because they want to know that you're going to be profitable. And there's a ton of, alternative lending sources out there that people can use. But that, again, in the BIPOC community, it's harder for us to get that funding.
Yeah.
The reality is non-BIPOC people probably have generational wealth. They can go to grandpa and say, hey, can I break my trust fund?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or, I remember I had a co-hosted a workshop last year and someone said, you all are risky. I know what the person meant, but read the room. You're looking at a room of minority business owners. Majority of the people there were BIPOC. When you say you all are risky, you're saying we're risky. I think what she meant was small business is a risky proposition.
Right.
But that's the reality that we face. So start saving if you want to start a business. Start researching how much it's going to cost you to start that business. If you don't have the money just to pay for the business card, to pay for the website, things like that, and where you're going to get that funding from, because no one is going to come and give you 100% of the money. You have to show that you have some skin in the game. Right. Did I answer the question?
You did.
You certainly
That's
did.
beautifully
Yeah,
answered.
and part of that business plan is the financial plan. You have to be able to show how whatever it is you're going to do is going to be profitable. Because any bank, is going to look at their bottom line, and do their own risk assessment. And it goes back to sort of, going out into communities where they are and providing them with this toolbox and this array of resources that are out there, whether it's a community loan fund, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce's small business revolving loan program, whether it's the state that has the JDA program, the Job Development Authority's loan program. There are tools out there, but it all starts with having a viable plan in place, showing that you've done your homework, you've done your research, because one of the biggest reasons a business fails is because they're undercapitalized at the outset. They may have a great product, they may have a great idea, they may have a great mousetrap, but if you don't know how to manufacture it, how to bring it to market, and how to drive people to your product or your service, at the end of the day, it is either a side gig or it's a hobby for a lot of folks. So if you want to be capitalized, you have to show the bank how you're going to provide a return on their investment.
That's a good point. Lucas, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think Danielle and Ryan really touched on most of it, but I would say learning how to sell your product, set yourself apart so you're different. So, you're not just one of many who's going to be doing a certain thing. Also building relationships with people that can provide that capital is important. So once again, getting out and networking and meeting people who might be able to provide you with an opportunity like that, and taking advantage of all the different resources out there that could help you do something like that.
I love that. I just wanted to touch on one thing really quick that you said. It's a little bit of a jump, but you said, be different, be outside the box a little bit. Makes me want to ask the question of how then do we kind of reshape our spaces to be more welcoming to ideas and people who might not fit the mold?
It's a great question. I think it comes with building that network and sort of looking at the opportunities and finding people within your network who believe in you, or who believe in the product or the service or the type of business that you may be looking at getting into. Because, I was in sales early in my career, and I always looked at a no right now doesn't mean no forever. So at some point, maybe the timing isn't right. Maybe the economic circumstances and situations isn't right for this type of venture. However, you if you're passionate about what it is you want to do from a business standpoint, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's food services, whether it's innovation and technology, if you're passionate enough about it, the tools and the resources are out there, and you just have to find people that within your network or build your own network, they're going to help you ultimately accomplish those goals.
I think also part of it is knowing your competition, knowing what other people are doing, and maybe setting yourself apart in some way. So once again, going back and doing your research is important. It's another thing to look into when you're making your decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to clarify, your question was, how do we set ourselves apart and let people know that we're accessible, or?
Well, my question was really more around the idea of stepping outside the box, being a little bit different and unique from what's around, and how do we make these programs, resources, and spaces, accepting of differentness? Because
so the Capital Region Chamber, for example, in its strategic priorities and looking at the plan and saying, okay, we must be accessible to all people. This is one way of doing it, of saying, hey, we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we want to take it a step further and have this BIPOC program where we're targeting BIPOC businesses that have been struggling. Because again, it's like, oh, nobody wants to help us. We don't know. But that's one way that an agency or an entity, an organization can make themselves more accessible, can pivot and do things to be more inclusive, to say, hey, we have, I'm not targeting you, Lou, but say, for example, Rensselaer says, hey, we're actually gonna have something that's specific to BIPOC businesses. You have to make that step to open yourselves up, to say, hey, we're offering this. We're having specific targeted projects that will help everyone. So that's one way of, stepping outside of your comfort zone. Because to say, hey, we have all these things that exist and we're going to market, but if the message is not being reached, you can be saying something, but who's hearing you? You have to find a way to get the message across. Now, you have a lot of people coming into the chamber and say, hey, we heard about this. Can I be a part of it? How can I get help? They may not qualify based on the criteria that have been set, but at the same time, they are reaching out because the message is passing. So agencies right across the state and the capital region have to make that effort to say, are we going to be inclusive? who are we targeting? Who are we looking at? It's one thing to say we're about technology, we're about healthcare, we're about this, but how does that small electrician who wants to have an electrical business, how do they get to be a part of this when criteria have been set to say you have to have had $1 million so you can't be a part of this, incubator program? Do we have accelerator programs within each of the counties that's going to help? Do we have incubator programs for those who are not at that level yet, and make that program where it's targeting a certain sector of the population? Because if we say we're building communities and it's about economic development, then everyone has to matter.
Yeah.
We have to put the work to make sure we're reaching everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree, and I love that. I love the idea of making sure we make programs specifically for people, especially marginalized or minority identities. I think that it's really important and critical so that there are spaces where they can walk into and say, this is for me. This is where I can excel and where I can grow and where I can achieve. And I think that that's so important. So thank you very much for sharing that. Would anyone like to add to that? Or
I would just add, you have to be deliberate then. If you want to do those things, you can't just say, we want to invest and create a more robust MWBE ecosystem and then not take the necessary steps in order to do that. Going into the neighborhoods and into the communities and helping folks understand how to access all these different tools and resources. So I think if your goal is to bring more inclusive and broader economic growth, you have to, again, go back to reaching people where they are, going out into communities and being a resource and being an advocate for the various communities that make up our broader capital region and more broadly, New York State.
Yeah. I like that though. I love that too. Also going into those communities, being part of it. It's so important. That is how we grow trust, and everybody knows in business, trust is like the most important thing. So I want to make one more little shift here, and I'd like to kind of shift a little bit to Lucas and Ryan, and I want to kind of hear a little bit from you in regards to small businesses and how it impacts them. But in terms of the policies and everything that both of your organizations kind of put out, what kinds of effects have you seen that have impacted small businesses from those larger, bigger kind of policies that have been put out towards organizations, kind of like what we were talking about with Micron, that kind of impact?
Yeah, so I can give one example. In the town of Schodack, there's a Amazon fulfillment center, 1 million square feet, bunch of jobs, big project. But it's trickled down so much that there's a bakery, small business, a couple miles down the road that said, Amazon's there, maybe I'll just go check things out. And now that bakery brings its food truck to Amazon on a weekly basis or something like that, and it has a business partner right there.
Yeah.
And is able to employ more people and create that tax revenue. So that's just one small example. And I talked about Regeneron. Same thing. There's an ice cream store in Troy that goes to Regeneron and does their events. And that's a small business that's benefiting from a larger company being there. So, those big projects, and that's just one piece of the puzzle, make a big difference in the community.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear that. That was great.
And I'll add, and I'll use Rensselaer County as an example. Since while we are a state association, I began my career in Troy and in Rensselaer County. You look at the investments in the public-private partnerships that the Rensselaer County IDA does. And for example, Regeneron, by investing in a large company like Regeneron, which ultimately now employs 4,000 plus people, the IDA generates revenue for themselves, for their operational purposes, but also generates revenue for them to reinvest back into other projects in their community. And with those investments, the Rensselaer County IDA has helped fund things like the Center for Gravity, which is downstairs here, which also led to the county IDA investing in and retrofitting the building that we're sitting in, which now houses IgniteU, houses a restaurant, and really it goes back to redeveloping and investing into a community. So there are supply chain and ancillary impacts that those larger sector investments tend to have. Another example I'll point to is you look at, one of this region's best success stories, Vicarious Visions, the company that created GrowTHRU. How many video game companies have sort of evolved out of that initial investment and initial growth of Vicarious Visions? First Playable Productions, Warner Brothers, MLB Gaming, creating this ecosystem of entrepreneurialism and gaming right here in the capital region. So those larger scale investments a lot of times spin off not only supply chain investments, but also entrepreneurship from people that worked at those companies and say, you know what, I've got my own idea. Now I'm going to go do something about it and create their own company. So there's a lot of stories like that, not just here in the capital region, but across New York State.
But we love those kind of stories. Those
We do.
stories where it kind of snowballs into another person building something else, or it's just great to hear. So Danielle, I kind of want to shift the question a little bit to say, how do you see these impacting small businesses? And especially BIPOC people. Do you see BIPOC small business owners getting benefits from these bigger companies kind of coming in and setting up shop and expanding their resources out? Have you seen good impact?
That's a really good question, and I don't think research has been done to say whether or not BIPOC businesses have benefited from it. I would have to get back to you on that one.
And that's fine.
But again, Luke mentioned, the food truck, and immediately I'm starting to think, is there really only one food truck?
I don't know. I just know that
Because I know want to go put a food truck out there and say,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's an
That's
exclusive
right.
contractor.
But they
The
can
Chris
have,
Cannoli, have you
they
ever
can-
been there? He's-
yeah, but they can have 2 food trucks.
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, maybe I spoiled their secret.
No, you need a variety. Amazon has how many thousand employees?
That's
Come
true.
on.
I
So-
agree.
But to answer that,
Yes.
sometimes we just have to have ideas and look where the opportunities are, do the research, and see if there is a market and get involved. And again, sometimes we don't know. We assume, we're not going to be allowed in. We don't know that, especially if it's from the state side, that there's a requirement for MWBE businesses to actually, get a piece of the pie, especially like in the construction industry and stuff like that. And when you're looking at like tech and energy, and there are actually tech and energy businesses that are BIPOC owned that I'm sure are probably benefiting from some of them. But as I said, I don't think the research has been done. And if it has been done, I have not read it or I don't know about it. But there are opportunities out there.
Yeah.
And not enough, in my opinion. But, we can grab some of them.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how with the new cannabis law and how there is a focus on companies being created here in New York by those that were disproportionately impacted by
Right.
cannabis laws
Right.
of the past. So it could create a model for the future on how do we adequately invest in communities that are adversely impacted by previous laws or previous investment decisions. So I'm interested to see how that's going to work. I will give some kudos to the state. They've really done an excellent job with advancing and enhancing the MWBE program across New York State.
Yeah.
It used to be a very cumbersome process to go through and get your certified MWBE or recertification. And they've worked very hard to streamline that process, make it a little bit easier to access your certification or your recertification. But they've been very deliberate about setting goals that are reasonable and achievable and putting MWBE officers in each of the 10 regional offices. So it's not all done centralized out of Albany or out of New York City. There's an MWBE rep in the Finger Lakes. There's one on Long Island. There's one in Buffalo. So I think they're taking the steps. Government sometimes moves a little slow.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the business. But I hope and I'm optimistic that we're taking the right steps to build a more broader and more inclusive economy in New York.
Yeah, that was great. That was actually going to be my next question was, do you see partnerships of these policies and maybe BIPOC MWBEs, kind of working together and building policies that incorporates to get them a piece of the pie. So that was a great answer, and hopefully we get to see more of that into the future. That would be great. So let's kind of go back to the jump a little bit. Let's have a little bit of a fun question here. Oh, we've hit 40 minutes. We've run over time way far.
Oh, did we?
Way far. So we'll just make this we'll make this really fun, okay? Because it's the reframe success, right? Okay, so how do small businesses, how do we start reframing success for them? What does that mean? Like, you do not have to be a national business. You do not have to be an international business to be successful.
But is it our job to reframe success for the small business, or is it that small business owner, that entrepreneur, that should define what their success is, and based on what they see as success, then they will, reach towards their target? We can say success is this, but if someone is quite happy just making $150,000 per year from their business because it gets them where they need to go, no, I don't need to expand, no, I don't want 2 locations, no, I don't want it to grow beyond that. In their mind, that's what they see as success. Now, we as agencies, entities, whether private sector or government, and it takes us right back to your first question, and Ryan spoke about it in terms of economic development and communities and all that. We can define success as X. We can define success as having this number of businesses in our area, in our region, and this is the revenue that the businesses bring in, and from that, the communities are thriving because we have communities that are making an income of X.
Mm-hmm.
So we can define success that way, but we can't define success for the small businesses themselves. What kind of business do we want in our region? Is it that we only want tech? Is it that we want, a wide kaleidoscope of businesses that are, covering all the areas, all the industries? What is it we want? We can set those policies from government and agency perspective, but the small business owner, they have to define what they see as their success.
Yeah, and I think that that goes into that business plan we were talking about.
Right.
So the business owners need to define. It's important for them to define what they feel would be success for them, and that way these different agencies can help them reach their goals. If we don't know what success is, then how do we get to a place that we don't know where we're going? So it goes into that first question about a business plan and how important that is, and taking advantage of those resources to help you get there.
You mentioned earlier generational wealth. When you're growing an economy, you're ultimately trying to create net new wealth. And how is that net new wealth being created within a community? Is it broad, or is it focused in certain geographical areas, certain neighborhoods, certain type of industries? And the more you create new opportunities for net new wealth to be generated, I think ultimately the more successful your region or your community will be, because the quality of life will go up. Neighborhoods will be nicer. You'll have places to eat. The quality of schools and education will increase in your communities. People will start moving and migrating into your communities because now you have housing options and people can afford to live in the houses that they're in. So, it's hard to just define what success would look like. I think ultimately the community has to help drive that definition of what success is.